Time travel stories have always compelled me. Time is such a bizarre and exciting thing to think about just because how much of our understanding of it is a product of our individual perspective as a species. We experience it second by second. We break it down for measurement and in language for the sake of communication, yet it's fully possible time and its mechanics exist or don't exist in ways far beyond our linear comprehension. Within fiction, it's an absolute playground of possibilities, but you'll constantly hear people complain that they're complicated or they don't make any damn sense. I'll just flatly state that trying to logically insulate a time travel narrative does not matter to me because any view we have of time is subject to strict linearity, something that we can't even prove time functions within. And our ideas of non-linearity only exist in contrast to our perspective of linearity. A movie like Back to the Future uses backwards time travel and its consequences in a very clear cause and effect type of way. A movie like Interstellar goes into a harder sci-fi direction by exploring pop quantum physics within its story, notably with its inclusion of time dilation, which as a concept in and of itself, that blows my mind. And if we're going the traversal of time, a movie like Arrival has a stunning exploration of time as a matter of lingual perspective. The inevitable difficulty with all these is that no matter how the movie chooses to break it down, we're stuck with the hard-set conceptions of past, present, and future. The idea of travel itself as if there's some sort of movement or displacement involved, hence why Arrival is such an interesting example. The very conceit of time travel, particularly when it comes down to meddling with the past, comes with its own contradictions and loopholes that have no definitive solutions. At least none that we can see, because it's all just made-up hypothetical stuff. So, the degree to which a story chooses to engage with the rules and logic of time travel as a process should freely be decided depending on the relevance to the story being told. I think of Looper as a sci-fi story in the same way I think of Star Wars as a sci-fi story. It has the aesthetics and a trope or two, but is largely dependent on its own internal logic. And trying to measure up the mechanics of its world to any scientific basis will just muddy the water and dilute what the story is actually doing. The concept of a looper is a neat one. They're hitmen who show up at a time and a place to dispose of a target sent back in time by a criminal organization from a future where murder is impossible to pull off. Part of their contract being that one way they will dispose of their target, get a higher payment than usual, unmask them, and realize it's their future self. From there, they are free to live the rest of their lives however they want, up until the moment the organization comes to have their loop closed by their past self. I love the world crafted around the story because it's very look and see. There's the apparent dystopian atmosphere of the city, but apart from that, the rural sections of the movie feel very true to reality for how it becomes unconcerned with flaunting the futuristic side of the setting. Time moves slowly in these places, and it makes sense that future technology is only adapted in certain specific instances. It's a very tactile movie. I love the audio-visual feedback of the Looper's blunderbuss weapon, or the exaggerated presence of Kid Blue's Magnum. The language of the movie likes to tell in the process is the character's take, from how Joe stashes and spends his money, Paul Dano's riveting recollection of his thought process and encountering his older self preceding his failure to close his loop, or simply to Sarah chopping away at a tree stump. It informs on how these characters think and how people exist within this future. Rian Johnson's love for noir and hard-boiled detective stories is clear from Joe's expository narration, and the recurring presence of deduction being rooted in or laid out between characters. And yeah, who are these people exactly?
I can't remember my mother's face. She's in my hands, through my hair.
Joe is a junkie and a looper, an orphan taken in as a child by the criminal leader from the future named Abe, who's been sent back in time to run the present-day operations of the organization. Joe's loop is closed, he moves to Shanghai, runs out of money, becomes a criminal again, and then he meets his wife. That stillness, that unconditional care that was always absent from his life. It's burnt up into flames as the time for his loop to be closed arrives, so he tries to change it. He returns to the past on his own volition to stop everything from happening. The Rainmaker, the ruthless and shadowy figure steeped in urban legend, the leader of the operation in the future, the one who's choosing to close all the loops. Old Joe is going to kill the Rainmaker as a child to prevent any of that from happening. And this creates a problem for Joe. Young Joe, his mark, his loop no less, is on the run. His life becomes completely upended as he becomes a target for the organization, so he has to hunt down his older self while the organization is hunting the both of them down. And that is story momentum right there.
Sun staring into your eyes. It's too strange.
Young Joe has not lived the life of old Joe. At this time, his only form of affection is paid for. He does his work, he does his drugs, he's hardly the worst of them, but he's not a good man. There's a detail that Joe is learning French. When his loop is closed, he plans to retire to France. There's this telling interaction between Joe and Abe where Abe insists that Joe go to China instead.
I'm going to France.
You should go to China.
I'm going to France.
I'm from the future. You should go to China.
I'm going to France.
You're going.
Abe is positioned as if he sees himself as a father figure. He tells the story of when he found Joe as a child.
I could see. Like seeing it happen on the TV. The bad version of your life. Like a vision. I could see how you'd turn bad.
He sees this path for Joe and he redirects him.
So I changed it.
Abe saw a malleable situation and recruited himself a looper. This is the importance of France to Joe. That vision he has for it is the primary source of genuine feeling, at least that he's shown to have at this point. The irony being how firmly he refutes Abe here, and yet we know he's destined for Shanghai. And I'll say this as an aside, but I believe this is the quality of the film that becomes more apparent on rewatches, and that's how blatantly readable young Joe and his intentions are. His lack of a real emotional center. It's more and more obvious the more times you watch his story play out. There's also Kid Blue and his Magnum that I mentioned earlier. He touts his weapon, bragging about the precision and skill required to use it instead of the clumsy blunderbusses, only to accidentally shoot himself in the foot. Kid Blue is essentially another Joe, but with none of the nonchalance and all the neediness he tries to drown out with bluster. Kid Blue hinges every bit of himself on the approval of Abe, and it gets him nothing. Short-sighted and arrogant, he barrels towards his end, with Joe eventually taking advantage of his poor aim with his Magnum and putting him down. The movie slows its momentum when Joe arrives at the farm. Here he's taken in by Sarah, a mother living as a farmer with her young son. Joe is only there because of a fraction of a map he tore away from his older self, which he learns contains the birthday and the addresses of 3 children who were born at the same hospital that the Rainmaker was born at on the same day. At this same time, old Joe stalks the home of one of the 3 children he believes is the Rainmaker. Old Joe murders a child, accomplishing nothing. An evil so great, all he can do with it is use it to find further conviction in his path. Young Joe slowly bonds with Sarah's son, a son who claims he isn't her son at all. When Sarah had him, she couldn't be bothered to raise him. She drops him with her sister on the farm so she can stay in the city and party, live night by night. It's only when her sister dies unexpectedly does she come back. She sobers up, she quits smoking, and tries to be a good mother. The thing that Joe comes to learn is that her son, Sid, has a terrible power. Telekinetic abilities exist in this future, but Sid is something else.
Because one day he'll learn to control.
Yeah, I know he will, and imagine what he's gonna do.
If he did good with it, though. If he grew up with me raising him.
Sarah's sister died by an accidental discharge of that power. And rather than fleeing further or responding with fear, Sarah committed herself to being there, to divert a terrible situation to put Sid on a good path, in spite of her loss and her own safety.
He doesn't.
Sid is destined to be the Rainmaker, but Sarah is convinced she can prevent that by raising him right. Young Joe initially refutes this, but upon finding the blood-soaked Sid in the field, he sees something that simply doesn't reflect what he knows Sid to become. The affection Joe has grown for the two of them is enough to convince him to help them, letting them attempt to flee when his older self inevitably arrives. So, the whole movie is built to this. Abe is dead, Kid Blue is dead, the only players left are Joe, his older self, a mother, and her child. Young Joe could let them die, that would probably solve any problems for him. There's no one left to hunt him. His older self lived his whole life with nothing but himself, his work, slowly dying as the abandonment shaped his life. He lived his whole life to have that pain healed and something new put in its place, and now he's turned rabid at the loss of it. And Sarah stands ready to die for her son. Her son runs in fear.
Then I saw it.
The path laid out the story between the lines of their actions.
I saw a mom who would die for her son, a man who would kill for his wife, a boy angry and alone.
Joe becomes human on the deepest level.
Laid out in front of him, the bad path, I saw it.
This story of time and vengeance, of love and abandonment, they're all living the same life. Only in witnessing Sarah and Sid's story, and witnessing his own story and what loss will do to him, he sees it all. He sees the circle.
So I changed it.
I love this movie. It's a moving exploration of the cycle of abandonment and violence, using time travel as a framing device. That's where the heart of the story is. It inventively constructs its narrative and edits scenes in a way that takes great advantage of its theming, that uplifts the inclusion of time travel from being a shallow gimmick to being a transformative element in how it engages with its themes and storytelling. Not to mention the incredible use of camera movement and just generally enthralling visual language, taking great inspiration from classic and neo-noir to westerns. God. But that's the movie, and I have to ask how you feel about Looper. How do you feel about Rian Johnson as a storyteller? I really love making these videos exploring media and art like this, and slowly but surely this channel is growing. And if you want to stick around and subscribe, every subscriber, every comment means a lot. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.